Hello and welcome to the Brett Norman YouTube channel. Today I have an upload of Behind the Dictators, Chapter 9. This one is called Hitler's Fight Against the Churches. And I'm going to also upload Chapter 10, National Socialism and Catholic Action, and Chapter 11, Rexism and Catholic Action. All three chapters in a row. And these are shorter chapters, and I just figured I'd put them all three in one video. And that way I have one more video after this, and then we will be uploading the book reading that your Klisman has done on the secret history of the Jesuits. Now, the idea in doing the study is to become more familiar with European history. And if you are from the United States, then this video is for you, along with me. Well, really, around the world, we're all dealing with these different teachings that we've been taught in our youth and growing up and living, in this system, this Antichrist system that we live in. And when we discover most everything we've been taught is wrong. And that's where we're at. We're in a load of hurt when we keep perpetuating falsehoods, and certainly the Bible helps us with that. It helps us to get out of the horrible insanity of perpetuating these doctrinal lies over and over and over again through this ritualistic type of worship that we've been instructed to do. This is exactly why my YouTube channel is around, and I hope to study this more and become more familiar with it. Now, the European history is a pretty difficult one because it's not something that I'm particularly familiar with all of it. I'm familiar with some of it, but there's a lot to learn. And it's not the easiest thing to learn, but once you become familiar with it a little bit, then it helps to become even more familiar with it more and more. And that's the purpose of doing these videos and uploads on my channel, is for learning the biblical truth in prophecy and history, and defining, coming to a clearer understanding and a clear conscience on what actually happened in history. So with that being said, we're going to go right into Chapter 9 here, Chapter 10, and Chapter 11. That's Hitler's Fight Against the Churches, National Socialism and Catholic Action, and Rexism and Catholic Action. And these chapters have to do with, this Vatican absolutism, this Protestant schism that happened in World War I, in World War II, and how that manifested into Vatican Council II, these types of things. And I urge you to study along with me and listen to what Yerk has to say. Very interesting and profound chapters here. So we'll catch up with you next time. Hope you're doing great. And here we go. Hitler's Fight Against the Churches, coming to you right now.
So, hello and welcome everybody to a new video from Joggler 66, Hour of the Truth. Today I record this on the 13th of August, the Sabbath day, because I like to do work for the Lord on the Sabbath. No other work but that. This video is called Hitler's Fight Against the Churches, and it deals with chapter 9 of the book Behind the Dictators by Herbert Lehman, where we have already read quite some chapters of. Hitler's Fight Against the Churches, the book continues. The full story of the rise of Nazi-Fascism has still to be written. When it appears, it will surprise most Americans to discover the part played in it by the Christian churches, Protestant as well as Catholic. Well, okay, Catholic churches are no Christian churches, but anyway, let's leave it at this. For Nazi-Fascism was as much a product of the churches as of the state, and the movement towards religious as well as political and social authoritarianism. European Catholic historians immediately recognized it as the final act in the Jesuit plan of counter-reformation, instituted exactly 400 years before, in 1540. Americans will never fully understand the real aims and activities of the Church of Rome so long as they continue to look at Catholicism from our American point of view. On this side of the Atlantic, attention has been focused mainly on attempts of a few liberal Catholic spokesmen to integrate their church with the American way of life. These are sincere in thinking that Catholic authoritarianism can be reconciled with the liberal, tolerant principles of American democracy. But the Church of Rome has its roots in Europe. Well, actually, it has its roots in Babylon. Mystery Babylon is Rome, and Rome is Babylon. But there is metaphysic which its metaphysic was first established. I'm sorry I butchered this one because of my comment. But the Church of Rome has its roots in Europe. As I said, actually it has its roots in Babylon. Mystery Babylon is Rome, and Rome is Babylon. There, its metaphysic was first established. It is therefore to its background and activities in Europe we must look if we want to judge what its real nature is. It is the policy determined upon beyond the Alps in Europe that directs and guides the Catholic Church even in America. Well-meaning Catholic spokesmen in the democracies are permitted to voice their liberal views, but their wishful thinking has never had any effect in real bringing the Catholic Church into line with our American democratic way of life. This issue has been bitterly fought out in Europe between Nazi-Fascism and the Christian churches. As far as Europe is concerned, the fight is ended, with victory on the side of Nazi-Fascism and Catholic Ultramontanism. In Italy, Spain, Austria, Poland, Portugal, France and Belgium, Catholicism alone was involved. In Germany, however, both the Protestant and Catholic churches have played their respective parts. There the struggles were as bitter and purged as bloody within the churches as within the state. They were more severe and bloody within Protestantism than Catholicism. Many more liberal Protestant leaders than Catholics were liquidated or put out of the way in concentration camps. By refusing to make any concessions to Nazism, the evangelical Protestant churches are said to have actually paved the way for the success of the German Christian movement. These German Christians, Protestant fascists, professed to consider it necessary to submit to a spiritual leader in order to free Protestantism of liberalism and rationalism. They thus became one with the Catholic fascists who, in keeping with the Catholic Action Crusade of Pope Pius XI, were purging every taint of liberalism and democracy out of the Catholic clergy, and were bringing the Catholic Church in Germany into line with pure Vatican absolutism. Gonzague de Reynaud, ardent Jesuit Catholic reformer, in his book L'Europe Tragique, states, and I will quote that in a second, information on this Jesuit, Gonzague de Reynaud, is to be found in French in a link that I will provide in the description box of the video here, and also in German in a link that I can provide, and in English there is nothing to be found in a quick search. His book L'Europe Tragique, or The Tragedy of Europe, is not to be found online. So I'm very sorry that Mr. Lehman cites this Jesuit here, and I cannot find very much on him on the internet, and certainly even not in English. I can't find anything on that in English. But anyway, Gonzague de Reynold, an ardent Jesuit Catholic reformer, in his book L'Europe Tragique states, quote, "A real fight has been waged within Protestantism. The evangelical Protestants refused to make any concessions and established a confessional church in opposition to that set up by the state. We are on the threshold of a religious schism. These are the final repercussions of the Reformation. We are witnessing a phase of dissolution of Protestantism. Many German Protestants believe that to reject a purely religious authority like the Papacy would constitute a danger to the Church and to Christianity." Unquote. Well, I personally think that when you read this paragraph between the lines, you can see the evangelical movement from Vatican II from 1962 to 1965 approaching in huge steps. So maybe for a better understanding, I just repeat this quote from Gonzague de Reynold here. And keep in mind, he is a Jesuit using casuistry and sophistry to make his point. So, the quote again. "A real fight has been waged within Protestantism. The evangelical Protestants refused to make any concessions and established a confessional church in opposition to that set up by the state. We are on the threshold of a religious schism. These are the final repercussions of the Reformation. We are witnessing a phase of dissolution of Protestantism. Many German Protestants believe that to reject a purely religious authority like the Papacy would constitute a danger to the Church and to Christianity." Yeah, because, unquote, because Protestants are not Catholics. They always reject a purely religious authority like the Papacy, because when you are a true Protestant, you only accept the authority of Jesus Christ, God, the author of the Bible, Jesus Christ, the Savior of mankind, and your personal Savior when you accept Him as your Savior. But by reading this, and now looking in 2016 back to American Protestant history, I think you can see that there is a schism, and that schism was actually founded with Vatican II. As he says in the last sentence, many German Protestants, and I guess also American, believe that to reject a purely religious authority like the Papacy would constitute a danger to the Church and to Christianity. That is the belief of the Jesuits. You understand that? They put the Papacy in front as a religious authority. And many German Protestants believe that to reject a purely religious authority like the Papacy would constitute a danger to the Church and to Christianity. No. Accepting a purely religious authority like the Papacy would constitute a danger to the real Church of Christ and to biblical Christianity. That's the way you have to read the sentence. But anyway, have your own thoughts on that, think about it, and maybe leave something in the comment here. But I think this is the way we have to read it. In order to understand what happened to the Catholic Church in Germany, it is necessary to go back to the time of Pope Leo XIII, well known for his unrelenting antagonism to the liberal constitution of states. In order to counteract the increasing influence of the 19th century liberalism on Catholic countries, Pope Leo XIII urged on Catholic leaders throughout the world the formation of Catholic political parties. He thought that if such Catholic parties took an active part in parliamentary politics, they would, by securing the balance of power, succeed in obtaining victory for the Church. He even hoped that these Catholic political parties would eventually obtain a large enough majority by democratic means to enable them to seize complete control of governments. What actually happened, however, was the very opposite. The Catholic parties gradually came under the influence of their liberal opponents and copied many of their ideas. Thus, in Italy, the Catholic party became the Popular Liberal Party, headed by the now exiled priest Don Sturzo. In Germany, it became the Liberal Center Party. Well, every Catholic, in what party whatsoever, pays his first allegiance to the Pope anyway. By that, all parties are Catholic infiltrated and serve the Pope anyway. Just have a look at Chapter 1 of Rulers of Evil by F. Tapasausi that I read on my channel, and you can find that, of course, in the playlist Rulers of Evil. And there you will see what I mean, counting all these Catholic laymen who are in power of every part of the civil life in the United States of America. Now the author continues, this liberal influence of Catholic parties became so great that the Holy See began to regard Catholic political trends as a grave danger, which actually threatened the juridical and political unity of the Church itself. These Catholic parties became infiltrated with the liberal spirit of the French Revolution of 1789. The ideas of the rights of man, of religious tolerance, of freedom of conscience, of speech and press were adopted by a great number of Catholic politicians and by many of the lower clergy. And we were already talking about the lower clergy in a previous video. So pronounced had this trend of popular Catholic politics become in the United States, for instance, that when Alfred E. Smith was nominated for the presidency in 1928, the Vatican Catholic bishops in Europe were shocked to hear that Mr. Smith has been prompted by priests to proclaim these principles to be not a mere matter of favor, as he first stated, but also a matter of innate right. This was rank heresy, and after Mr. Smith's defeat at the polls in 1928, the Vatican rebuked those who had advised the former governor of New York to proclaim doctrines so contrary to official Catholic teachings. By the end of the First World War, the Catholic political parties had begun to lose the importance which they had in the eyes of the Vatican when it first brought them into being. They became so integrated with democratic states, founded as they were on political compromise, on tolerance and the idea of equality, that it was confusing to note the alliances made by some Catholic parties with bourgeois groups and by others with the socialist groups. It had become apparent that the control of Catholic priests was being lost by the Holy See in Rome. Pope Leo XIII's plan had miscarried and had proved a boomerang against the real aims of the Church as he had proclaimed them. Catholic political action had acquired an independence that made it a menace to, rather than a docile instrument of, the Vatican. Liberal Catholicism, in fact, which, to all appearance, had received its death blow by the decree of papal infallibility towards the end of the 19th century, that was at Vatican Council I in 1870, to remind you, had taken on a new lease of life by means of the very Catholic political parties which had been established and sustained by Pope Leo XIII to oppose the hated liberal constitutions of democratic states. This is how the Vatican saw it after the First World War, and the conclusions which it drew from its observations in the matter were the first steps towards the rise of what we now call fascism. Many of the non-Jesuit religious orders in Germany, notably the Franciscans and the Benedictines, started movements which displeased the Vatican. the quote-unquote liturgical movement of the Benedictines, their attempt to establish contact with the ecumenical evangelical movement, and their effort towards a reunion of all Christian churches. The attitude of the Patris Unionis, means fathers of unity, who were even prepared to modify the dogmas of papal infallibility and the Immaculate Conception in order to help their work of reunion. Their open and secret negotiations with groups in the Anglican Church under the guidance of the late Cardinal Mercier. All these liberal reform movements were regarded as tainting the lower clergy and the intelligent laity with the heresy of liberalism and Protestantism. The Vatican regarded its authority as gravely menaced by it all and determined to wage relentless war against this growing liberalism in political and spiritual matters. Now, with this last sentence, of course, I have to make a little comment. You probably smell that coming, as you know me. I repeat that sentence. The Vatican regarded its authority as gravely menaced by it all, and determined to wage relentless war against this growing liberalism in political and spiritual matters. Now, here again, we see the agenda of the oaths of the Jesuits, where it states, quote, I furthermore promise and declare that I will, when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants, and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls, in order to annihilate forever their execrable race. That when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisoned cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed to do so by any agent of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith, the Society of Jesus. Unquote. Did you listen carefully? When opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war. Do we really need any more proof to see who actually runs the Vatican? Huh? It should not be surprising that Rome became disturbed at the prospect of a revival of the Lutheran Reformation. It was particularly marked in Germany. Friedrich Heiler has the following to say on this point. And Friedrich Heiler, you have to know, was a professor at the University of Marburg, and in his work called Im Ringen um die Kirche, means the struggle for the church. And the quote goes as follows. These recent tendencies of Catholicism have spread to a great extent in Germany. German Catholicism is in fact a particular kind of Catholicism, due to the fact that it has been subject continually, if not visibly, to the influence of the Reformed churches of Christendom, and has constantly absorbed certain features belonging to evangelical Christianity. Unquote. So, in other words, when you read between the lines of Friedrich Heiler, he says, the Roman Catholic Church in Germany is faced with the same problem the American Catholic Church faced from the start, having to develop its agenda as a minority in a, for Catholics, hostile environment, because the majority of the environment is Protestant, is Bible-believing. Just think of the Puritans you had over there in the United States of America by the time of 1776. 98% of the complete population in the 13 colonies were Protestant, because they knew what they flew from when they came over from Europe to this new world. They flew from the yoke of Rome. They knew what was going on. But if not every generation over and over again fights for its freedom, it will be lost in the end. So the author continues. But the democratic states were the most powerful in the world at that time. Yeah, how come? Because they could really develop themselves without the yoke of Rome, and brought out all these wonderful inventions. Look at all the inventions Americans brought out in the 19th century, and the Germans brought out in the 19th century, and the English brought out in the 19th century, while still being, for a very good part, Protestant, and not that much under the yoke of Rome as they used to be in the Dark Ages. The Catholic political parties had become too strong to be stopped by mild protests or even by encyclical letters from Rome. Repressive action carried out by the help of authoritarian secular regimes was necessary. Thus, the two great opposing factions within the Catholic Church became locked again in a gigantic struggle. One possessing the evangelical Catholic idea, deep-seated as of old in the hearts of true Christian believers, the other the coldly imperial, sectarian and intransigent Roman party, represented by the Holy See under the domination of the Society of Jesuits. It is in the light of these facts that Hitler's, quote, campaign against the churches, unquote, must be viewed. Neither Hitler nor the Jesuits could forgive priests and bishops in Germany who sided with the cause of liberalism and democracy during the Weimar Republic. It was against them that the acts of Catholic repression were directed. Hitler and Antichrist Pope Pius XI acted in concert, meaning together, to destroy every vestige of liberalism in Germany, the one in social and political life, the other in the sphere of religion. By dissolving the Catholic Center Party, the Pope removed the last obstacle to Hitler's rise to power, and also deprived the Catholic people and clergy in Germany of any say-so in political matters. He had done the same for Mussolini in Italy by the dissolution of the Partito Popolare and the exiling of its priest leader Don Sturzo. By his Catholic action, he concentrated all Catholic political power in the Holy See. Thenceforth, the Vatican was free to make arbitrary concordats with the fascist dictatorships. And that concordat they signed with Germany on the 20th of July 1933 still is valid today, 2016. The lower clergy in Germany did not yield without a struggle. Many defied both Hitler and the Pope. Some priests were imprisoned. Even when the pristine ardor of Cardinal Innitzer for Hitler and Nazi socialism showed signs of cooling, hostility was engineered against him. Catholic schools, mostly under the care of liberal, non-Jesuit religious orders, were closed. Some heads of these anti-Jesuit religious orders were punished for attempting to save their funds by smuggling out of the country. In the press of America, this was called, quote, Hitler's persecution of the Catholic Church, unquote, and served to conceal the common purpose of Nazi socialism and ultramontane Catholicism. There were some mild protests from Rome, but no adverse action. Even the closing of Catholic schools in Austria went almost unprotested. These were regarded by the Vatican as but a small loss compared to what was gained by the elimination of disobedient priests and their liberal views. The Nazi Vatican Concordat continues to hold and function even until today, as I already stated. With the extinction of liberal Catholicism and the imprisonment of liberal Protestant leaders, Vatican absolutism was triumphant. Of supreme satisfaction to the Jesuit Catholic faction was the knowledge of the apparent dissolution of Protestantism in Germany and the fact that the pro-Nazi Protestant German Christians were forced to realize, as Gonzague de Reynolds point out, that, quote, to reject a purely religious authority like the papacy would constitute a danger to the Church and Christianity. Unquote. And this finishes my reading of chapter 9 of the book Behind the Dictators from Leo Herbert Lehman. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, thanks for commenting, and until next time, Joggler66 from Hour of the Truth says God bless you and signing off. Bye bye.
All right, we're back here. This is Brett. I have chapter 10 of Behind the Dictators now coming at you. And this one is called National Socialism and Catholic Action. It has to do with the Vatican's war, this Counter-Reformation war against the liberal spirit in Europe and around the world. And this universal Catholic reform that was promoted. The aim to set up an evangelical papacy, evangelical Catholicism, the Counter-Reformation. So this is our furtherance in our study of the Counter-Reformation before we get to the book, The Secret History of the Jesuits, a book authored by Edmund Paris, read by Jurk Listman of Belgium. So here we go, chapter 10 of Behind the Dictators.
So, hello and welcome everybody to a new video from Jörg from Joggler66, Hour of the Truth. This one is called National Socialism and Catholic Action and deals with chapter 10 of the book Behind the Dictators by Leo Herbert Lehman. This is a very short chapter, so something you can probably think about a lot after reading, not while reading, because I think it will be done within 15 minutes or something. But I don't include that into any other chapter because I'm really making a video chapter by chapter, so that it's always easy for you also when afterwards you look at this to find some things you just know, okay, this wasn't this chapter and that was in that chapter. Anyway, National Socialism and Catholic Action. Catholic Action, the crusade for Jesuit Catholic reform, has the following characteristics. First, its direction as laid down in Pope Pius XI's encyclical Quadragesimo Anno is explicitly entrusted to the Society of Jesus. Second, its aims are the extermination of the hated liberal spirit of the 19th century, the formation of a world crusade against socialism and communism, the success of the Counter-Reformation. Third, the means to obtain these ends are the annihilation of the old Catholic political parties, which became impregnated with the democratic ideology, and the purging of the secular clergy, the religious orders, and the laity insofar as they persist in holding to non-Jesuit opinions in matters of ecclesiastical policy. And fourth, the most suitable political regime to assure the success of this crusade for Catholic reconstruction is the hierarchical, authoritarian form of the fascist state or of Nazi socialism. These were 4 points, and you can read them as I read them, or you can, as John Daniel put it in his book, The Grand Design Exposed, quote, the program of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order, the Church to rule the world, the Pope to rule the Church, the Jesuits to rule the Pope. Such was and is the program of the Order of the Society of Jesus. And you can read that in John Daniel's book, The Grand Design Exposed, in chapter 6. Now, continuing in this book. The secular clergy of the Catholic Church in Germany and other European countries have always secretly fostered a democratic tradition, and for many years considered it their principal task to live in peace with Protestantism and the liberal institutions of the modern world. For this reason, they constituted the chief obstacle in the way of the Catholic Reconstruction movement initiated by the late Pope Pius XI. They were not friendly to the idea of the corporate state, to the plan of the New Crusade, which actually were World War I and II, and all the wars that followed and still follow today in 2016 and beyond, nor to the Vatican's aim to set up complete papal absolutism. Unlike the Irish-dominated clergy in America, the Catholic clergy of France and of Germany and other European countries have never fully identified the Pope himself with the seat of power in Rome. They are squeezed in taking their religion from Rome, but not their politics, nor in accepting the Vatican's direction of extra-spiritual matters in their respective countries. In other words, they did not accept the Pope as ruler on civil affairs, meaning being emperor and head of the spiritual church at the same time. This is a remnant of the reformational thinking that has to be done away with, and they have to accept ultramontanism. Now, in modern times, the European Catholic clergy veered increasingly to the idea that it was advisable to encourage Christian tolerance and friendly relations with all religious sects, even with those who belonged to no church. What does Pope Francis teach today? Think about it. Many were persuaded that the day would come when all the Christian churches should be united on a basis of universal evangelical reform within the Catholic Church. Remember, this book was written 1942. 20 years later, this thinking was put into practice by the Second Vatican Council and the start of ecumenism and the further expansion of charismatics. Now, this liberal reform would be aimed at the overthrow of the jurisdictional papacy with its unscriptural political Roman curia and its claims to ecclesiastical absolutism. It would be a reform against papal imperialism, against Jesuit fascist discipline and overlordship. It would aim to set up an evangelical papacy which, freed of political ambitions, would act as a center of evangelical unity for all churches of Christendom. This would indeed be true Catholic reform, a second Reformation, the setting up of evangelical Catholicism. It would mean the purging of medieval accretions from doctrine and liturgy and, of course, the complete banishment again of the Jesuits from the Church and the world, as was accomplished by Pope Clement XIV in 1773. Now, I can't help but to make a comment here that you absolutely cannot reform the Roman Catholic Church, because the Roman Catholic Church comes out of Babylon and is the church of Satan, and you cannot turn Satan over to Jesus Christ. You cannot reform the church of Satan to become a church of Jesus Christ. You cannot make fire out of water. I mean, you can, but you understand what I mean. All such aims and plans for a liberal evangelical reform, however, fell within the explicit condemnations of religious tolerance and the liberal democratic idea by Jesuit-controlled popes during the past 150 years. The late general of the Jesuits, Worms, in his treatise on canon law says, quote, and now listen carefully, this is very important. As concerns the relations of the Catholic Church with other religious associations, there is no doubt that all religious associations of unbelievers and all the Christian sects are regarded by the Catholic Church as entirely illegitimate and devoid of all right of existence. These organizations are formally rebels against the Church. As a consequence, he is in grave error who believes that the different religious sects, such as, for example, the Anglicans, the Lutherans, the Orthodox Catholics, constitute legitimate parts of a universal Church of Christ, universal Catholic, and that they are in some way collateral branches of the Catholic Church or sister churches. Unquote. This is important. And the Black Pope of that time, Worms, the late general of the Jesuits, that was probably the one who came before Lodorkowski, says here that as concerns the relations of the Catholic Church with other religious associations, there is no doubt that all religious associations of unbelievers and all the Christian sects are regarded by the Catholic Church as entirely illegitimate and devoid of all right of existence. Meaning, you can annihilate them. You can completely wipe them off the face of the earth. These organizations are formally rebels against the Church, the Roman Catholic Church. As a consequence, he is in grave error who believes that the different religious sects, such as the Anglicans, the Lutherans, the Orthodox Catholics, constitute legitimate parts of a Catholic Church of Christ, and that they are in some way collateral branches of the Catholic Church or sister churches. So what does this say then of Vatican II, where all these people he just summed up here are called separated brethren? It's just another kind of speak, but they still hold to the same thoughts. There are no separated brethren, whether you are Catholic or you are a heretic, and then you are devoid of all rights of existence, as he says here. That's the point that you have to understand. And Rome never changes. And something important like the Black Pope Worms said here still is today, always was, is today, and will be in the future official Jesuit policy. It is not because they changed the name of the office of the Inquisition to the office of the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith that they changed anything they are doing. They just changed the name, but it remains a slaughterhouse. And it will remain a slaughterhouse for real Bible-believing Christians. I find this a very, very important sentence, or few sentences, a little paragraph, that the former general of the Jesuits, Worms, in his treatise on canon law, stated here. And I will make sure that when I produce the video, I will put the statement in there that you can read it for yourselves. And otherwise, well, the link to the book to download it as a PDF from the internet is, as you know, provided in the description box of the video, so you can read it for yourself. Against this hope for true Catholic reform that would have brought about a tolerant, evangelical Catholic Christian church, that's a long sentence, evangelical Catholic Christian church, the Jesuits swept the field for an absolutely totalitarian setup in Catholicism to go hand in hand with the Nazi-Fascist regime in the secular order. On their side, they had Hitler himself, who, as far as condemnation of religious tolerance is concerned, has always shown himself to be a better Catholic than the ordinary European priest and many bishops. In Mein Kampf, and remember, the book was written by a Jesuit father, so in Mein Kampf he upholds, in Mein Kampf the Jesuit, Father Stempfle, who wrote this book, upholds and approves of the dogmatic intolerance of the Vatican Party in the Catholic Church. Like the Jesuits, he regards religious tolerance as an effective instrument for the establishment and support of the liberal aims of the Jews and Freemasons. His chief cause of complaint against the clergy of the Center Party in Germany was that they had allowed themselves to become convinced of the idea of tolerance, that they had made alliances with these deadly enemies of the Christian religion, of the Catholic religion. He holds that his principal task is the combating of this deplorable situation from which religion has suffered so much. He also condemns Protestantism for persisting in its tolerant attitude towards Judaism. He adds, however, that, quote, the believing Protestant who belongs to National Socialism could exist side by side with the fervent Catholic without his religious convictions being in any way affected thereby, unquote. This yielding of Catholics to the liberal tendencies of religious tolerance was regarded by the Jesuits as the, quote, Protestantizing, unquote, of Catholicism. To correct this, they deemed that drastic punitive measures were imperative. The late Jesuit Cardinal Billet expresses true Jesuit contempt for this yielding of the secular clergy to liberalizing tendencies, and also advocates the severity that should be meted out to them when he speaks of, quote, the poor little parish priests who fill the greater part of our religious magazines and periodicals with their speeches, seeking thereby to create a new apologetic to take the place of the miracles which the 20th century no longer understands. There are but two replies to make to this. The first is the whip, unquote. This is in perfect keeping with Mussolini's symbol of the fasces, or bundle of rods, as you can see them in America in the Congress for yourself, such as he and his Nazi partner have so ruthlessly employed to scourge Europe of every vestige of liberty and tolerance. Now it comes. Thus, Hitler's program of Catholic repression is but the carrying out of the Jesuit punitive measures and a part of the plan for Catholic reform against those members of the Catholic clergy in all countries who have opposed Jesuit hegemony over Catholic affairs. Shall I read it again? Thus, Hitler's program of Catholic repression is but the carrying out of Jesuit punitive measures and a part of the plan for Catholic reform against those members of the Catholic clergy in all countries, United States too, who have opposed Jesuit hegemony over Catholic affairs. So when in America the persecution of Christians starts, and they will also persecute Roman Catholics, do not wonder why. They will always persecute Catholic lay people who side with liberals. They will always persecute the lower clergy who have no idea of the higher agenda, and by that try even to make peace with Protestants. Those will be persecuted. That's what this little last sentence actually says. Catholic action, like Nazi-Fascism, ostensibly started out as a crusade against godless communism, which, the Jesuits say, is but the radical application of the Protestant principle of the separation of church and state. They hold that communism is the extreme of Protestantism predicted by the Jesuits since their founding by Ignatius Loyola to fight the Reformation of Martin Luther, and is the result of the wrong principle that the internal life of the individual is the only place where he should be allowed to seek satisfaction for his religious needs. The Jesuits therefore launched their new offensive, principally against Soviet Russia, the first country since the wars of religion that seriously threatened to undermine their work of counter-reformation. They have found it more menacing to their aims than Protestant England was in the 16th and 17th century. By completely separating the state from influences of all forms of religion, the communists have tried to make religion a purely private matter, and by this means to effect the complete liberation of the individual and the conduct of civil affairs from all ecclesiastical influences. Now I know it's longer than 15 minutes, I don't care. I have to make a comment here. They have found it more menacing to their aims than Protestant England was in the 16th and 17th centuries, by completely separating the state from the influence of all forms of religion. The communists have tried to make religion a purely private matter. Okay? Did you understand that well? Well, when you followed the news a little bit in 2016, you know that in Russia, which is so-called not communist anymore, there is now a law out that you are not allowed to proselyte without the church. That means whenever you try to convert somebody to Jesus Christ, to the real belief of the Bible, outside of the church, whether in your home or on the street or in any other meeting, whatever you do, or even on the internet, you are breaking the law. That's today, 2016. Russia, the first country to come out with punitive measures like this against proselyting outside of the church. And tell me, how can you, as a true Bible-believing Christian, proselyte outside of the church? Because you don't go to any church, because you know you are always visiting a temple of Satan, right? So in Russia, you cannot proselyte, you cannot convert anybody to the Bible anymore. The Word of God is prohibited out of the churches in Russia today in 2016. This book, remind you, was written in 1942 and dealing with the communists who persecuted the Orthodox Church like hell and killed millions and millions of people in gulags and working camps and concentration camps. Stalin, actually, when you look up what all happened under Stalin, made Hitler a choir boy. You know? But that's never talked about. And Stalin was a Jesuit priest. So of course they had separation of church and state, because they persecuted the church. There was no church in Russia. There was no church in the Soviet Union except for underground. And the only thing that was held up, well, that's because the Pope has because the Pope had his protective hand above them. To finish with the ecumenical movement, what the sword didn't do. And look today, how many true Bible-believing Christians you find in Russia. But hey, How many do you find in America? Really? To the Bible adhering Christians? All over the world? I would not say a handful, but you know, at the time of Noah, there were only 8 souls, eh? Anyway, you have to understand that what Herbert Lehman is writing here, that he probably is not that much aware of that communism actually was founded by the Jesuits, and that playing capitalism against communism is just a Jesuitical theater of ratio studiorum, and the Cold War never happened. Well, we all know that today when we study history, but by completely separating the state from influences of all forms of religions, the communists have tried to make religion a purely private matter. And that's exactly what they are doing today, with by law forbidding to proselyte. They make religion a private matter. And then, when they check your privacy, which you don't have, because the intelligence agencies all over the world watch everything we are doing, listen to every word we are saying, reading every word we are writing, watching every movie that we are watching, every movie, I mean like documentaries on the internet about Jesus Christ, for example, about this one, for example. You don't have no privacy, and then they know how to get you. And that's the agenda all behind it. Because of this, on page 59 the author continues, the Jesuits identify Protestantism and democracy with socialism and communism and seek to destroy them together with all movements to the left of fascism and Nazism, because there is no other political action that is ordained by the Jesuits than fascism, as I read to you in the Civilta Catholica. Catholic action, similar to Nazi-Fascism, will not be content with any half-hearted reform in Catholicism. Just as a brutal war campaign against democratic nations has been deemed necessary in Nazi-Fascist policy, so a brutal cleansing within the Church, even at the risk of some loss to Catholicism as a whole, is a necessary part of the Jesuit program of Catholic reconstruction. Gonzague de Reynold, who we already cited before, one of the most ardent zealots of the movement, whom we have already quoted in these pages, frankly admits that the wiping out of these Protestant tendencies, meaning liberalism and socialism, constitutes the first problem of religion, namely of Roman Catholicism, and that the new Christian regime, which will come about as a result of this desired Catholic reconstruction of the social order, will have to be fascist, since he says, quote, "Fascism has been the only successful attempt to create a new regime," unquote. And the Italian socialist L. Segni confirms this when he states that, quote, "Fascism is an epiphenomenon in keeping with the evolution of the Catholic Church as directed by the tactics of the Jesuits," unquote. This is saying just the same as the Civilta Catholica, the house organ of the Jesuits, states, where we read, quote, "Fascism is the regime that corresponds most closely to the concepts of the Church of Rome," unquote. That was chapter 10 of Behind the Dictators, called National Socialism and Catholic Action. Now, open your eyes and look around in the United States of America 2016 if you see any resemblance of that what I read here in your country. Well, if you don't want to see it, then of course you don't see it. But he who has eyes to see and ears to hear, he can see. Therefore, always rely on the true Word of God, the 1611 authorized version of the King James Bible, your only guide through this world, and your only holdfast that you will have when, as they say, quote, the shit hits the fan, unquote. Then at least you are prepared. Preparing doesn't mean to stock up with canned goods, ammunitions, and weapons. Being prepared means to put on the whole armor of God and his two-edged sword, the Word, the true Word of God, to fight with. That is a legitimate weapon we have here on Earth. So, Juggler 66 from Hour of the Truth, signing off. God bless you all. Thank you for listening and watching. Until next time, bye-bye.
Okay, this is Brett. I'm back for Chapter 11 of Behind the Dictators, Rexism and Catholic Action. Now, this is a really interesting chapter that Jörg read in this book, and I find it particularly interesting that since Jörg is a German who moved to Belgium and is now doing a reading on some of the history there, and you see the European Parliament building there in Brussels, and how that is the very epicenter of the European Union at this present day, 2018. So anyway, we'll get right into the reading and discussion that Jörg does here. I encourage you to listen in, and I thank you, Jörg, for all these readings you've done. And we're looking forward to uploading the brand new recordings that Jörg did. Well, they're not brand new. They're a little pause here. But I'm very thankful that Jörg is allowing me to upload the upcoming book, The Secret History of the Jesuits by Edmund Paris, read by Jörg Glissman and discussed by him on Juggler 66. And we're going to bring that to you very shortly. So here we go.
Hello and welcome everybody to a new video from Juggler 66, Hour of the Truth. This one is called Rexism and Catholic Action, and is the last but one chapter, chapter 11, in the book Behind the Dictators from Herbert Lehman, written in 1942. So we're almost through the book, and here comes the last but one chapter, Rexism and Catholic Action. Nowhere has Catholic action shown itself more in line with Nazi-Fascism than in Belgium, where Leon Degrelle's Rexist party in 1940 came into its own. Now, on Leon Degrelle, I'm gonna make you a little note here that you know who he is. After the Second World War was over, Degrelle took refuge in Francoist Spain. He was convicted of treason in absentia, means in absence, in Belgium, and sentenced to death, but repeated requests to extradite him were turned down by the Spanish government. Stripped of his citizenship and excommunicated, which the excommunication was later lifted in Germany, Degrelle died in Malaga in Spain in 1994. Another example of how the Roman Catholic Church protects its fascist leaders from persecution, because such was Leo Degrelle. If you still want to learn more on the Rexit Party, as is laid out here, you can read these Wikipedia pages that I will provide in the description box of the video, but notice that Wikipedia is always to be taken carefully, and you have to read that with a little bit of salt when you understand what I mean. It is an open source, so not everything is quite correct, and surely not when you measure it to the Bible, the Word of God, the real and only truth that we know. But continue. Pope Pius XI gave the Jesuit slogan Christus Rex, which means Christ the King, to Catholic action as the battle cry for its crusade over Catholic reconstruction of the social order. This slogan, Christus Rex, is from the spiritual exercises of Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuit order. The same cry, Viva Cristo Rey, was used by Franco's fascists in their war against the legitimate Republican government of Spain. It was the war cry of the fanatic Mexican Indians who were spurred on by the Jesuits to commit acts of sabotage against the Republican government of Mexico. It was also the cry of the Spanish rebel officers who, with the help of the Moorish troops, tortured, violated and slaughtered nearly 15,000 men, women and children alike at Badajoz. The Rexists in Belgium claimed the honor of being the first fruits of Catholic action, the quote-unquote Christian Frontiers of Belgium. Their leader, Leon de Grelle, the Belgian peasants nicknamed him Adolf de Grelle, was won over to the movement by the Monsignor Picard when he was a student at the University of Louvain. He and all his assistants are products of Jesuit training. And we can read that in R.A. Dyer in his book Le Vatican in Paris, 1937, published on page 42. Quote, Leon de Grelle is a pupil of these gentlemen, i.e. the Jesuits. So also are all his colleagues. Unquote. He became the great lay apostle of Catholic action in the Jesuit drive to align the Catholic Church with Nazi-Fascist plans for the new order in Europe after the destruction of liberalism and democracy. As the scope of de Grelle's activities increased, his Christ the King movement was temporarily separated from Catholic action in Belgium with the consent of the hierarchy. This maneuver was designed to give the Rexists greater liberty of action to work out Nazi-Fascist policies. This I call another example of the Jesuit tactic blown cover as cover. Thereupon, the apparently independent Rexist Popular Front was set up ostensibly to fight Jewish communism, much on the same lines as Father Coghlan's Christian Front in America. Now, Jewish communism. When communism is actually an invention of the Jesuits, as you can see by studying the reductions of Paraguay in the 17th century. But again, of course, blaming and putting Jews in the front for all to see. When everybody learns that communism is Jewish and communism is not good for individual prosperity, then of course the Jews are to blame. And nobody suspects the Jesuits behind it, who actually started communism. For that, just Google reductions of Paraguay and see what the Jesuits did there in the 16th and 17th century. And you will learn how communism actually came to life. Now, de Grelle's chief officer was the White Russian Denisov, who was secretary to the last president of the council in the Tsarist regime. Today, de Grelle is Hitler's right-hand man in Nazi-occupied Belgium, where no signs of disagreement are apparent between the Catholic hierarchy and the Nazi invaders. In their joint pastoral letter of October 1940, the Catholic bishops of Belgium instructed their people as follows, quote, It is doubtless necessary to recognize the occupying power as a de facto power and to obey it within the limits of international conventions, unquote. And this quote comes from the Jesuit magazine America on the 22nd of February 1941, out of the horse's mouth itself. He has organized his own stormtroopers, formation de combat, he calls them, formations of combat, and is fast bringing Belgium into close collaboration with Hitler's new order. In a heavily censored dispatch from Liège to the New York Times on January 6, 1941, de Grelle said, quote, "We must make our choice now. We have faith in the Führer as the greatest man of our times. Trust his spirit, his genius, and have faith in the Europe which he will build up. The youth of all Europe is today fighting shoulder to shoulder for a new order under German leadership. German weapons will win because they are defending a just cause. Hitler saved Europe, and Belgium's future could," several words missing here in the telegram, "cooperation with the Reich." So probably, and Belgium's future could be secured by cooperation with the Reich, the Third Reich. That probably means. End of the quote. Now, as I just read to you, the youth of all Europe is today fighting shoulder to shoulder for a new order under German leadership, de Grelle stated in this censored dispatch from Liège to the New York Times. Now, remind you the words of Pope Leo XIII to the German Emperor in 1917, as quoted in chapter 4 of this book. Quote, "It was of interest to me," says the German Kaiser, that the Pope said to me on this occasion that Germany must become the sword of the Catholic Church. I remarked that the old Roman Empire of the German nation no longer existed, and that conditions had changed. But he, Pope Leo XIII, stuck to his words. So, when this was told the German Kaiser in 1917, de Grelle picks this up during the Second World War by saying the youth of all Europe is today fighting shoulder to shoulder for a new order under German leadership. Now, let me ask you a question. 2016, today, who is actually the strongest country within the European Union, the revived Holy Roman Empire of Europe? Huh? Economically, politically, who is the strongest one? Germany, eh? So what they didn't achieve in the World War, they achieved afterwards by fomenting the European common market, the European economic common system, later on with the introduction of the euro monetary money to make Europe all the same, that everywhere in Europe you can pay with only this one currency, and this is all under German leadership. By the way, do you know where the ECB, the European Central Bank, is seated? Frankfurt, Germany. The same city that gave birth to the Rothschilds in the time when they lived in the so-called Judengasse in Frankfurt, a banking town. It is also called Manhattan, for it is at the river Main in comparison to Manhattan. It is called Manhattan, Frankfurt. Germany leads. And this is exactly what Pope Leo XIII wanted already in 1917, when he spoke to the German Emperor and said that Germany must become the sword of the Catholic Church. Now we continue in the book. There never was any secret about de Grelle's collaboration with Hitler. In its issue of May 20th, 1936, the Paris newspaper Le Temps, means the Times, called attention to the close relationship between the Rexist party and Hitler's National Socialism. And shortly before the Belgian elections in May 1936, de Grelle went to Germany to study Nazi propaganda methods. After the example of the German Führer and Father Coughlin, he sought to gather around him all the discontented elements of the middle class. In imitation of Goebbels, he curried favor with the workers by appearing to side with strikers. The chief point of comparison, however, between Rexism and Nazi-Fascism is that both declared war on Catholic liberal tendencies among both the clergy and the laity, with the aim of setting up the Jesuit authoritarian control of Catholic activities. This was the real reason why Catholic action was instituted by Pope Pius XI. And I went already in earlier chapters on the persecution of Catholic liberal tendencies, of the liberal clergy and of the liberal laity, because when you read the oaths of the Jesuits, and I made a video on that, so you can always look that up, the Jesuits are to go against liberals, even in their own ranks, of course, because the church has to be the gainer in the end, and liberals cannot be accepted. Now, it is not out of place to repeat the underlying reasons for this desire to abolish all pre-Hitler Catholic politics throughout Europe, a thing the Jesuits for many years had ardently longed to see accomplished. As already pointed out, the old Catholic political parties had become intimately bound up with the liberal constitutions of states, wherein all parties and religions were able to coexist freely. Furthermore, the ideology of the liberal democratic state, with its principles of religious and racial tolerance, was broadening the political and social outlook of these Catholic parties. The fraternizing of the secular clergy with the laity in these political parties furthered the spirit of tolerance as opposed to the traditional intolerance of Catholic dogma. On the other hand, it must also be remembered that in Germany the two Catholic political parties, the Centre Party and the Bavarian Popular Party, because of their close religious connections with the Roman Catholic Church, had met with strong opposition from the Protestant part of the population. As a consequence, the constituted existence of these parties threatened to compromise the aim of Catholic action, which was to use Germany as the instrument to effect its counter-Reformation designs. It was thus necessary for a new Catholic policy to camouflage itself as a national movement and make itself appear as the only party representing the nation as a whole. Now, I cannot but go back to the last but one sentence. As a consequence, the continued existence of these parties threatened to compromise the aim of Catholic action, which was to use Germany as the instrument to effect its counter-Reformation designs. Now, when you think about it, isn't that kind of cruel to take Germany, from which the Reformation actually really took heat, with Luther in 1517 nailing his 95 Theses on the church door in Wittenberg. So Germany was the cradle of the Reformation, and now they use Germany as the instrument to effect its counter-Reformation designs. You get that? Germany first is the cradle of the Reformation, and now they make it the cradle of counter-Reformation. That happens when you have the power of the Roman Catholic Church in your country. So, my dear American brothers, think about what will happen to your country that was Protestant from the beginning, hijacked in 1776 by a Catholic government all the time, and today is completely run by Jesuit-trained persons. Counter-Reformationists. Jesuits are nothing else but counter-Reformation. Every time I read the word Jesuits, you can also read counter-Reformation. Means against the Word of God. But okay, continue here. It can thus be seen why the abolition of the pre-Hitler Catholic political parties in Germany had the approval of the movement for Catholic reconstruction. Here is what Gonzague de Reynaud has to say on the point. Quote, "The Centre Party, which Hitler fought with all his might, because they were liberals, was forced to commit suicide. But it was a party which had already shown signs of deterioration, which had made many mistakes, and upon which the young people were turning their backs. The news that soon they could take part in real Catholic action without any addition of party politics aroused great enthusiasm." Unquote. For the very same reason, the Rexist party in Belgium, direct offspring of Catholic action, likewise declared, quote, "All Catholic parties are the result of a fixed historical situation and have advantages and disadvantages for the Church. When these historical situations cease to exist, Catholic parties lose their reason for existence. This applies equally to the Catholic party in Belgium. Up till now, differing opinions could be had as to their usefulness and their right to existence. Today, however, they are anachronisms. I'm sorry, I butchered this word. They are anachronisms. Oh yeah, that's not an easy word to read, so I'm going to repeat the sentence. Up till now, differing opinions could be had as to their usefulness and their right to existence. Today, however, they are anachronisms, as were the Centre Party in Germany and the Popular Party in Italy." Unquote. The Catholic Party did not understand the new historic mission. The confessional movement did not transform itself into a national movement. Because of these deficiencies, it had to disappear like all other parties. The Rexist Party will now take up the defense of Catholic and ecclesiastical interests. It does not only intend to defend the Church, but also to take the whole religious question out of politics. It will effect this by means of the constitutional guarantee of the rights of the Catholic Church and by drawing up a concordat to regulate the relations between the state and the Church. This is end quote from what the Rexist Party in Belgium said about Catholic action. Thus, according to this new Catholic policy, there is to be no apparent separation between Catholic action and the Nazi-Fascist thrust for the establishment of its new order in Europe. To the Rexist Party was assigned the task of regulating the relations between the Roman Catholic Church and the fascist state in Belgium by means of a concordat, as was done in Germany through von Papen and the present Pope Pius XII, then papal nuncio to Germany. This new historic mission of the Church of Rome, initiated by the Lateran Pact and Concordat of 1929 between the Vatican and Fascist Italy, calls for collaboration with the Nazi-Fascist dictators, unhampered by any questioning of interference from the people or the lower clergy. Liberal principles and popular freedom have to be crushed out as completely in the Church as in the state. Quote, "We in America are only now beginning to see clearly how the noose was formed to strangle all forms of liberalism and democracy in pre-Hitler Europe in order to make way for the Nazi-Fascist hierarchical grouping of nations and individuals in a sort of revived Roman Empire of the German nation. And the real motivating force behind it all has been the thrust of the Jesuit counter-reformation, antedating all the dictators which aimed to crush out of existence the hated liberal principles of the Protestant democracies. It has indeed been an ungodly combination that worked together to accomplish this objective. Catholic reconstruction movement of Pope Pius XI, Italian fascism, Hitler's National Socialism, French anti-Semitic leagues, La Roque and the Cagoullards, Belgian Rexism, the Hungarian racist movement of Father Banga, White Russian Association, Croatian associations, whose hand appeared in the assassination of King Alexander of Serbia and French Foreign Minister Bartu, Slovene separatists led by the Jesuit father Anton Korashets, who worked his way to the presidency of the Senate in Yugoslavia, the Catholic prelates and politicians of Old Austria, Monsignor Seipel, Dollfuss, Schosnik, and others, the priest politicians of Slovakia, Carpatho, Ukraine, and Bohemia, Fathers Hlinka and Tiso, not forgetting Franco and his fascist generals in Spain and the Laval-Pétain cliques in France. All of these worked closely together and were interlinked with the Roman Catholic Church in working towards the same end, the destruction of the post-Reformation structure of Europe and the world. But the end is not yet. And I'd like to add here, we still have to conquer the United States of America, and by them, the rest of the world. And you probably remember me from other broadcasts quoting from the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Daily Tribune, that is, from May 5th, 1903, a quote from Archbishop James E. Quigley, in October 5th, who lived between October 1854 and July 10th, 1915, who stated in that issue of the Chicago Daily Tribune, quote, "When the United States rule the world, the Catholic Church rules the world." Now, everybody knows that at least from the end of the Second World War, the United States of America have really become an empire. An empire, the second beast of Revelation 13, that gives allegiance only to the first beast, whose wound was healed, as we just read, in the Concordat, in the Lateran Treaty of 1929 with Mussolini. Since then, the Roman Catholic Church has gained more and more power, and since the United States of America are under total control of the Jesuits, they are under total control of the Roman Catholic Church. By that, when the United States of America rules the world, the Roman Catholic Church rules the world, and this chapter of the book ends with the sentence, "But the end is not yet." No, the end is not yet. The end of the Second World War was almost there at that time in 1942, just 3 years to go, but the end is not yet. The biggest fights still have to come. They extirpated probably all the Protestants in Germany, and they did the same over there in the United States of America with the ecumenical movement with Vatican II. And all the Protestants that they did not get by the ecumenical movement or the rising of the charismatics, they will get when martial law is put upon you. Because the Roman Catholic Church seeks to destroy Protestant Christianity, Bible-believing Christianity. And the biggest bulwark today of Protestantism still left in this world is the United States of America. So even it is on the top, reigned by the Roman Catholic Church, they still have to get the people in line with the politics of the government. And whenever you're not in line with the government, well, you follow the news. I don't have to tell you what's going on over there in the United States. You know it by yourself. And the United States of America is not ruled by law, it is ruled by executive orders of Presidents George W. Bush and Obama, and probably the one who comes after him, whether that's be Trump or Hillary Clinton or I don't know. They're all Jesuit puppets. Now you just cry up, "Oh, Trump is a Protestant." Yeah? Is he? First of all, the Protestants are all ecumenical. That's point one. Point two, Trump has had 2 years of Jesuit University Fordham training. He has 5 children, of whom 3 went to Jesuit schools, 2 to Penn U, and 1 to Jesuit Georgetown University in Washington. And don't even get me started on Hillary Clinton, who you know that her husband, former President Bill Clinton, was Jesuit educated at Georgetown University, and he very much held up to Carroll Quigley at that time. Anyway, this ends the reading of chapter 11 of Behind the Dictators and leaves us with just one chapter, chapter 12, Pro-Germanism of Pope Pius XII. That's for another video. Thank you very much for your attention, for listening and watching to the video. God bless you, and until next time, Joggler 66, Hour of the Truth, signing off. Bye bye.